"Somebody needs to kill my trial attorney." These were the last words of George Bernard Harris, who was convicted for murder and executed on September 13, 2000. You might have heard of last meals on death row, but what about last words on death row? From bone-chilling declarations to bizarre food puns, the world has heard a number of creepy last words from some of the most terrible convicts throughout history. Here are some of the creepiest of them all. Make sure to wait until the end, as there's an interesting fact about one of these last words that you would not expect. Thomas J. Grasso. Thomas J. Grasso, who was executed on March 20th, 1995, was convicted for strangling an elderly woman with her Christmas lights, stealing $8 from her purse and $4 found in her home, and also selling her TV for $125, murdering an elderly man, and stealing his Social Security check. His last words were, "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." Timothy McVeigh. In 1995, Timothy McVeigh took on the nickname Oklahoma City Bomber after setting off the bomb he created that killed about 149 adults and 19 children at an Oklahoma City federal building. He was sentenced to death, and when his time came in 2001, he chose to remain silent the entire time the lethal injection administering took place. He, however, did leave a note behind in place of his valid final words. Quoting the last few lines of the poem Invictus by Sir William Ernest Henley, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." Timothy McVeigh was executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001. Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos was convicted of shooting to death and robbing 7 of her male clients while she was working as a street prostitute along the highways in Florida. She claimed that her clients had either raped or attempted to rape her, and that all of the homicides she committed were in self-defense. Wuornos was sentenced to death for 6 of the murders after 12 years on Florida's death row. She was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. She was said to develop mental issues, and her last words, which were, "I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back," shows it might be true after all. Robert Sullivan. The case of Robert Sullivan is an interesting one. Convicted of murdering Donald Schmidt, an employee in the Howard Johnson restaurant where Sullivan used to work, Schmidt was shot in the head twice with a shotgun in 1972. Robert Sullivan was on death row for over 10 years, and he fought the death penalty with support from the likes of Pope John Paul II. Unfortunately for him, he was not successful in convincing the Supreme Court that the death penalty was an ineffective and cruel punishment. Sullivan was executed by the electric chair on December 1st, 1983. His final words were, "In spite of what is about to happen to me, do not quit. I hold no malice to none. May God bless us all." Coming from someone who tried so much to change his punishment, but not deny his crime, it leaves one with a lot of questions. Billy Wayne Coble. Billy Wayne Coble was arrested for murdering his estranged wife's parents, Robert and Zelda Vicha. He also murdered her brother, Bobby, in 1989. Before he murdered them, he went to his estranged wife's home and tied her and her daughters up. Billy Wayne Coble remains the oldest man to be executed in Texas, more than 100 years after the death penalty was reinstated in Texas. He was executed by lethal injection on February 28, 2019. And his final words, which were spoken in very quick succession, were, "Yes, sir, that'll be $5. I love you. I love you, and I love Mike. I love you. Where's Nellie at? I love you. That will be $5. Take care." No one really knows what $5 meant, but when he said this, it was all directed to his family made up of 5 people. All were in attendance when he died. John Wayne Gacy. The next death row murderer we have is someone who might as well be the devil himself, especially with his last words spoken on death row. Also known as the Clown Killer, John Wayne Gacy was responsible for the murders of over 33 young men and boys. He would lure his victims in with the promise of a job, alcohol, drugs, or money for sex. Otherwise, he would simply grab them off the street or con them by using a sheriff's badge before murdering and burying the bodies. He would repeatedly torture his victims before killing them. He was a member of the Jolly Joker Clown Club, which is one of the reasons for his nickname, the Killer Clown. Another reason he was called that was because he would always tell his victims as he killed them, "This is the final trick." This was after repeatedly playing tricks on them as a means of torture. John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. His final words were, "Kiss my ass." Richard Ramirez. If you think these were not creepy enough, don't worry. The next death row serial killer on our list was a religious man. Too bad that his religion was praising Satan. A serial killer comes about by circumstances and with recipes like poverty, drugs, and child abuse. These things can contribute to a person's frustration and anger. At some point in life, it explodes. Between 1984 and 1985, Richard Ramirez terrorized California and was nicknamed the Night Stalker. He would break into homes and use various weapons like guns, knives, and even hammers to butcher his victims. He did not discriminate at all in who he attacked. His youngest victim was 6, and his oldest victim was 83. The devout Satan worshipper was brought to justice and sentenced to death for 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 13 burglaries. Although he was sentenced to death, Richard Ramirez died just before his execution in 2013. His final words were, "Hail Satan." Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is one of the most notorious serial killers known to the world. He has been the subject of countless films and documentaries for his various acts of abuse and violence perpetrated throughout the 70s. Ted Bundy, in his time, murdered more than 30 women. A lot of people claim that his final words are nothing more than the means of a sociopath to elicit sympathy from the ones who hear him, that it does not necessarily mean what they are saying. In the case of Bundy, nobody will ever really know his final words, for many of them were creepy. Considering the heinous nature of his crimes, Ted Bundy was thrown in the electric chair on January 24, 1989. His final words were, "I would like to give my love to my family and my friends." The thing about psycho serial killers is you never really know what the hell is going on in their heads. In the case of Ted Bundy, the truth of his last words might never really be known or understood. Jimmy Glass. Glass was executed on June 12, 1987. He was convicted of shooting Newton and Earlene Brown to death while burglarizing their Dixie Inn home on Christmas Day, 1982. Jimmy Glass claimed that Wingo, whom he had escaped jail with before then, forced him at gunpoint to kill the Browns. He was executed by the state of Louisiana. He is best known not for his crime, but as a petitioner in the U.S. Supreme Court case Glass vs. Louisiana. His last words were, "I'd rather be fishing." Gary Gilmore. Gary Gilmore was the first man to be executed following the Supreme Court decision allowing capital punishment to resume in the United States in 1976. Gary Gilmore was convicted of murdering a motel manager in Utah, which resulted in his death sentence. Now here's an interesting fact we mentioned at the start of the video. The shoe brand Nike actually got the inspiration for their tagline through Gary Gilmore's last words. Gilmore was executed by a firing squad on the 17th of January 1977, and his final words were, "Let's do it." The punishment may not always fit the crime, but nobody will ever agree on what punishment does fit a particular crime. And that's the really interesting thing about all of these serial killers. If you want to see more videos like this, please turn on all notifications and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.